Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Michael Blick, and this is part two of my How to Paint a Taos Blue Door. We're going to be we're going to be finishing up. Whoa, hey, there we go. We're going to be finishing up this very painting that I'm holding here that I'm having trouble angling towards the camera. But we're going to be finishing this painting up. And this video was originally filmed in April of 2021 for my World of Watercolor class at San Juan College, located here in Farmington, New Mexico. It was shot at my studio in Artifacts Gallery via Zoom. Just like with part one, I didn't have the best microphone, so I had to re-record some of the dialogue. You'll notice there are some spots where I sound a bit different. If you haven't watched part one yet, go back and watch that first. There'll be a link in the show notes below. Both these videos come in around an hour, a little over, but I promise you we're going to have a lot of fun. If you're new to the channel, which I'm assuming most people are because I'm sort of new to YouTube, please take a moment and like the video and subscribe to the channel. It will really help me out, and I want to keep bringing you cool watercolor content like this. If you enjoy the video, consider sharing it with anyone you think may enjoy it as well. I'm going to once again make a little plug for Utrecht Art Supplies. My affiliate link is in the description, and if you click on it, it will take you to my current supply list. Be sure to check that out. Some of the items like paint colors are doubled up because I recommend different brands, so they're available for both. Don't feel like you need to order everything on the list. Just take a look and pick and choose things that you think you might like. I also have a discount code for Meaden Art, which is MBW70 for 12% off your purchase. The link for that is also down below. Meaden Art is a great site for budget-conscious artists, especially those wanting to try watercolor for the first time. They have some amazing deals on their brand of watercolor paints and brushes, and they feature some really great studio furniture. So be sure to check them out as well. Now let's get started with part two of how to paint a Taos blue door. And we're back working on the blue Taos door this week. We're going to finish this painting up. I'm pretty excited. I hope you are too.
Okay, so I need a bit more, well, I've noticed I need to kind of fix this little bit of a curve right here. So I'm going to come in with this green right here that I was using on the same spot, kind of see if I can't make that curve a little bit more. And if it's not perfect, I'm not too worried about it. You know, I keep trying to tell myself, okay, we're just having fun. This is just kind of a fun thing we're doing. So it's not, doesn't have to be perfect. We're practicing. And that's a little better. I like that curve a little bit better. But I also need a little bit of a shadow on the inside of this door to help push that back. So I'm going to take this violet kind of color. I think I was using permanent magenta. So I'm going to start off with some of that. And then I was using some quinacridone violet as well. What I'm going to do is just kind of pull this down. First with a little color, I can kind of soften that edge. And then I'll pull this down. And right now it's going to look a little wonky, but don't fret. Let's see. Let's come in with a little quinacridone violet and a little of the blue quinacridone violet blue mix. And then let's just kind of pull this down. It's like so. And then, after this dries, I'm going to come over here and soften this line because it's a bit more of a curve, a soft corner than a hard corner like I've just painted it. So I'm going to soften it. So, and I'm going to have, I forgot about this, but I'm going to have a little bit of a shadow on the door too, so I need to take that into account. But I'll do that after this dries because I don't want those two to run together. But you can see I've softened that line. You almost can't tell that there was anything there. And this looks quite a bit darker than it is on screen, so that's what's going on there. So let's let that dry. Well, actually, while that's drying, I'm going to come in and kind of deal with this shadow under here. Because while this is in shadow, there's this darker section that's the bottom of that beam that goes across the top of the door. So I'm just going to use some indigo for that. You could use like a real dark blue or whatever. I'm just going to use indigo though. Well, I may mix it. Actually, I'm going to mix it with a tiny bit of Hooker's green in it. So let me kind of show you. That's what this is right here. This kind of mix. It all looks very similar, but it is a little bit different. So let me use that, and I'm going to come in. So I've got this kind of curve. It comes down here, and then that back kind of plate, if you will. And that looks really dark, but it's not going to be that dark when it dries. And I'm just going to pull that across, get a little more water. And all that is really is just the underside of that beam. It's a really thick beam, at least in mine. And that's just going to help push that door back as well. So let me come over here and kind of soften this. That's still a little damp there, but that's all right. And all I'm going to do is just kind of come in with a clean brush, just soften this edge just a bit. They should have waited a little bit longer on that, but that's okay. That was just a bit wet, wetter than I thought. We'll just kind of come in like so. Soften it, and then pick it up. So come in, soften this. Every now and then I pick up a little bit of color, like wet, and put it on there so that it'll bleed over into this area where I'm softening and cause a little bit more softening. Clean the brush, that area up a little bit. That just gives us that kind of curve. We're going to end up with some shadows over here, so I'm not too worried about this not being as nice as that. But you can see I softened that quite a bit, so it looks a little more gradual, a little more curved, and starts to build that depth in. So it's going down into that doorway. So the doorway feels a little deeper. What I'm going to do over here is actually pick up some of this shadow bit here. Even though it's in shadow, it's going to be picking up just a wee bit more light. And to get rid of that line, I'll just come in and soften that. So I'm getting that little bit of reflected light, where it's just gonna be picking up a little bit more light. So it's just a bit lighter in that shadow area. It also gives it that curve. Soften that a bit. I'm just going to add a little more purple over here. Just I didn't care for that lighter splotchy bit there. It doesn't look that light on screen, but on my painting, it looks a little weird. And then I want this side of the wall to look a little bit, like here, to look just a touch darker than what I've got there. So what I'm going to do, and I don't want it a lot, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a little pyro orange. But you could use just your cadmium orange, or I have a permanent yellow orange. I could use that. But in this case, I'm going to use a little pyro orange because it softens out to that nice peach color. So there's a fair amount right there. And obviously that's too much, but it's pretty wet. So I'm going to just kind of move it around a little bit with water. And then what I can do is really kind of come over here and soften this edge just with a clean brush. Pick some of that up. Let's see. Like so. But you can see I've kind of continued that just by adding just a wee bit of pyro orange. Or again, if you wanted to use, if you don't have pyro orange, if you want to use cadmium orange, whatever orange you've got, or even like I could use a little Scarlet Lake if I wanted to over here. And the fact that it's a little, I've got these kind of broken up, splotchy things where I haven't covered everything is okay because it's an Adobe house, so it's going to have that kind of rough plastered kind of look. But you can see just that little tiny bit that I added made that pop and look so much lighter, like it's catching more light, and that gives it that depth that I want. Let's do this doorknob. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take just a little bit of quinacridone gold and a little bit of burnt sienna and then a little bit of indigo, and I'm going to make this look kind of like a rusty doorknob. So I've got this quinacridone gold up in there, just a wee bit of it. I got it a little too dark, so I'll just pick some of that up. And then I'm going to come in with a little bit of that burnt sienna. Or if you don't, want to use burnt sienna, if you have something like quinacridone burnt orange or quinacridone burnt scarlet, I've got one of those. That's kind of fun. Any of those. So while this is still wet, I'm going to come in and add a little of that. And so let me just add a little more water. And then I'm going to come in with a little of that indigo green mix that I made. And I'm just going to finish off this side of the doorknob with that. Just kind of come in around there. Let me see if I can zoom in on that so you can kind of see what's going on. Not, there's not a lot to it. All it is that little doorknob. And then I'll have a shadow that comes off of it as well. But pretty easy, little quinacridone gold, little burnt sienna, and a little indigo or royal blue mixed with green, hooker's green, or Prussian blue would have worked fine, or Antwerp blue, any of those kind of green blues. Yeah, and there's not a lot of detail in that. I don't need a lot. Maybe I want to drop just a hint of copper right in there, just to add a little tiny pop of pizzazz. Get that to bleed out. There we go. Nobody will ever notice it, but me. But it makes that just kind of sing a little bit more. And that's really all there is to that doorknob. Really simple. And then once that dries, which will be here in a second, I can add a little bit of a cast shadow from it. There we go. And I'll just come in with a little royal blue, maybe. This shadow is going to kind of come in right in there. I'm going to make it a little elongated, like so. And I don't know, can you guys see that? Just kind of zoom in on that. Yeah, just kind of pull that back down and make that shadow there. What I am going to do is make that edge of the. Let me dry that real quick. I'm going to make that lead, that backside edge of the doorknob just a skosh darker. Just kind of come in like that. Maybe put a few dots of dark on here. I don't know if you can. You can't really see it, but just made it just a skosh darker, just so it pops up from the shadow a little bit more. And then added just a few little dots of that dark on there as well. Not too bad. I'm so far I'm pretty happy with this. I need to figure out what my plan is for this stoop. I think I'm gonna. I even though I've got some blue down on here, I'm not too worried about that. So what I'm gonna do is go over it with a layer of permanent yellow deep, or if you have just a kind of medium light orange, show you that's this color right there. And I have some on my palette here, and I'm just going to not worry about that color on top. That's just going to add another layer of texture. And all I'm going to do is so I've got a little bit of that down, and now I'm going to pull in a little of this permanent yellow orange. I'm going to end up painting a shadow over here anyway, a little bit of a shadow there. And then I think I'm going to, permanent yellow orange I think will be fine. I'm just going to pull that in like so. And really what I need to do is come back in on this face spot right there that needs a little. I'm going to come back in and actually do this entire face. So it's going to look a little flat for a second, but that's okay. So that was the permanent yellow deep, and then I've got some permanent yellow orange in here. I could even bring in just a touch of opera, just to give it a little bit of a different color change. Up in there as well. And this is going to look flat for a little bit until it dries and we do the next kind of step. But we need to get this first layer of color on. Even with that color on under there, it's going to help add to that texture. Now I want to look at some of, like this is close to dry. It's not quite dry yet. But I want to look at, this is going to, because the sun's coming this way, I'm going to have a bit of a cast shadow off of this. And perhaps, and really because it's coming in
from the upper left-hand side of the painting,
we're going to have a bit of a shadow on this wall as well. So really what I'm going to do is just kind of say, okay, well, this maybe kind of comes down like that. And that's my little bit of shadow. That's going to kind of be in shadow. And then this area is going to be in shadow, so that I've got this kind of pot coming off here. And then maybe a little more. Well, and then there's going to kind of be this little bit of a triangular shadow. So it's going to kind of do that kind of a thing. And then maybe there's some sort of something that's coming in here that I want to add. Maybe there's, a tree out in the yard or something that's kind of casting some sort of shadow. Let's see, there's going to be a bit of a shadow on this, like so. And maybe even something like that, just to kind of, we're just going to end up making that slightly darker. So I don't know. Let's see. I don't know what this is. Maybe this is a post. It doesn't really matter. I'm just telling a story. I just want something to kind of pull you in here, pull you up this way, and back around over to here. So that's what I've done here. You know, why I ended up putting this here, because my door originally was supposed to be over further. So I added this little guy because I had this centered so much. So I want some sort of, I don't know, some sort of shadow in here that'll pull you in. Then you'll come up, you'll see this and get pulled in this way. That pulls you back down and around. This shadow kind of pulls you in into this doorway. And then when we get to it, we'll have this little medallion thing in this space here that'll kind of help tell that story. So I want to do some of these shadows now. I'm going to kind of do something similar to what I did up here. I'm going to start off with a little quinacridone violet. And I'm just going to start up in here. And I'm not too worried about following that pencil line I drew on there, or even mimicking what's really here. Doesn't matter. You can't see what I'm doing. It doesn't really matter because people won't notice that it's different. I think I'm going to switch now to a little peacock blue here where it starts to get a little cooler. And I want that to kind of run up into the purple, or that violet. Now here, it gets a little weird, so it's just going to kind of disappear. That shadow is not going to be on that part of the door. It's just going to be out here. Let's see, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go to a slightly darker purple now. So what I did was just added a little bit of that Hooker's Green blue mix to my quinacridone violet, and you can see it just made it slightly darker. And then this is going to come down. Maybe it gets a little darker down in here. So what I'll do is add a little bit more of that Hooker's Green blue mix, so it gets a little bit darker purple. I'm not really liking that color on top of that. It's not going to hurt anything. I just think it needs to be a little warmer right there. Back in here, I wanted it to be a little cooler. Here, I want it to be a little warmer. Maybe a little of that peacock blue again. And then even into this little bit of this cast shadow. And really, this is just, maybe this comes up a little bit more right there. I'm just trying to sort of change that shape a little bit of that shadow. Let's come in with a little lighter Hooker's Green blue mix. So now I'm taking a little Hooker's Green and a little peacock blue. That just makes it a slightly brighter blue-green. And I'm letting that touch in a couple of spots so it bleeds together, but then I'm also not letting it touch in some spots so that I have little lines of light just to help change those shapes a little bit or define those planes, because I have the plane here of the step, and I have a plane that goes back into space. This is a flat plane. That's a vertical plane and another flat plane. Let's see. Let's go back to this kind of warm quinacridone violet, or warmer, because it's still a fairly cool color. I'm going to use a little opera because maybe there was a little bounce of light off of something. Slightly darker purple. Some of it up in there. This is kind of the smooth part of the pot there, and then maybe this is where those leaves are kind of bunching out a little bit. That was a little dark what I grabbed there. That was that dark Hooker's Green blue mix that bled into a little of the purple. But that's okay. It won't hurt anything. But that kind of gives that impression of there's a nice little cool spot right there. We have this kind of intense warm coming through here. and that cools it off quite nicely. And then I think I'm going to go ahead and put this shadow in too, just to help sort of define some of this stuff. And then once that dries, I'll put in kind of a darker shadow here. I drew this coming in almost to that point, so I really need this to come up. Maybe it comes up like that. Let's start with a little, I think, just plain quinacridone violet. It's going to kind of come in like so. I'm going to use a little actual alizarin crimson on this in a few spots. So this is going to be a fairly warm shadow, then it'll cool off.
So now we're going to come in with a little of that quinacridone violet mixed with a little hooker's green and just a skosh of royal blue.
To kind of cool it off in a couple spots. Maybe it's kind of glowing over there on the edge. Let's go into some of this actual hooker's green blue mix that's darker. Maybe this is a post or something. Let's come back to some of that violet blue mix. And I want to be pretty careful next to this edge of this pot. So I'm carefully laying that in.
With the side of my brush.
And then as I get back out here, this can kind of bleed back into there. Maybe this. But that now pushes this pot forward. Just add a little more water.
To get that to naturally blend together a little bit better.
I'm going to kind of pull this over here up. Just make it a little wider. Now I've got a line that's kind of starting there. I need to kind of scrub that out. Maybe if I throw in a little alizarin crimson again, right in here, that'll kind of help. I don't like that shape.
So I'm going to change it here with a little alizarin crimson. That just was weird. I don't like that shape. It's got this weird bend that I don't quite understand. I just can't think of a reason for that bend to be there. And it's kind of an ugly shape, so I'm just going to straighten it out here.
On this terracotta pot, I'm just going to use some alizarin crimson. Kind of start down here where maybe it's a little warmer. And then I'll work into that quinacridone violet.
And then I'm just going to add a little bit of water here just to lighten that up a bit.
Then I'm going to add just a little alizarin crimson. I'll start down here. And then I could even go a little darker on this because it's over here in the corner. So there's a bit of a... And that was just taking some of that really dark purple that I mixed. If you feel like you got it too dark, you can always come back in and lift some of that back out. Just to give it a little... Maybe there'd be a little bit of a shadow.
Up in this area here.
A little bit of that quinacridone violet blue mix. It's right in under there. Probably wouldn't be here, but it doesn't matter. I'm just kind of adding it just to give it a little sharp edge right there. And then maybe just a little bit over here. Now these flowers, we could probably go ahead and put them in. And what I'm going to do is a little opera and a little scarlet lake. But what I'm going to do is just come in with a little opera in a few of these spots. Put kind of a little, well, my hand was kind of covering up what I was doing there. Put in just a little blob of color in a few spots. Well, I'm going to do all these flowers really quick. Opera, and some, kind of high on the flower. And then I'm going to come in with a little scarlet lake and see what happens. This is just kind of a little experiment. I've got that little hint of pink, and then I come in with this salmony red. And that starts to look a little bit more like
A geranium.
if you don't have Scarlet Lake, you could use permanent red. Let me zoom in on that so you can kind of see what I did. See, you can still see that opera. And I wasn't too worried about completely filling that in. If I've got a little white showing, I'm okay with it. This is that impression of these flowers. So I'm going to come back in now on this other pot of plants, and I'm just going to hold it closer so you can kind of see what I'm doing. Put a little opera. Just a little bit of that opera, and then I'll come back in and let this Scarlet Lake kind of run into it. And then where I just have a little pink, I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to leave that. But there we have it. Impression of flowers in a pot. I'm actually thinking that I want this shadow to come down there. I'm going to take that dark purple that I've got there. It won't be the exact dark purple,
but it'll be close enough.
Maybe a little bit more of this darker color coming down in there. And I know that doesn't look like it's going to blend in, but once I kind of feather it out with some water, even if there's a little texture on top, that just felt like it. That felt like it gives me this reason for this, this thing to kind of pull up.
And I'm just going to add a little Hooker's green mixed with royal blue right in here just to kind of blend that in as well while it's still wet.
Again, I mean, it may not be based on anything in reality, the shadow, but it felt like it needed something to help pull your eye kind of up. And maybe, that sort of ties in, maybe this is a post or something. So it helps tell that story. Okay, so we're going to put a little bit of detail into this door. I think the window I'm just going to do fairly dark with a few little highlights of where light maybe is bouncing off of it. So I'm going to use indigo and Hooker's green mixed together. Again, a Prussian blue or a Antwerp blue mixed with Hooker's green would be fine, or royal blue if you've got that. Maybe there's a few little spots where light's bouncing off of it. And I can kind of clean up this shape a little bit. Maybe now I want a kind of fairly dark violet in there as well. I'm going to take actually some of that same color that I just made and mix that with a little of my quinacridone violet right here. I don't want this to be super bright white like it is, so later I'll come back in and knock that back a little. Right now I want this to dry. There's my window. Pretty simple. It's just dark. The inside is darker than outside. And then what I can do is dry that really quickly. If I zoom in, you can kind of see that purple in there a little bit better. But now what I can do is come in with a little peacock blue or something like that and just knock that back a little. And even if I pick up some of this other color in there, it's okay. I'm just knocking those highlights back just a skosh so they're not bright white. So, I mean, it's there, but it's real subtle. So now I want to put a little detail into this. And this is where we're going to use a pretty fine brush. I'm going to use my number 6. And I'm just going to take that same, so it's that same dark dark color right here, this dark blue green that I mixed with indigo. I used indigo and Hooker's green. You could even just use like pure Prussian blue, but I've got this nice kind of dark blue green. It doesn't even have to be blue green. If like I said, if you just wanted to use Antwerp blue or Prussian blue or royal blue, so I'm just going to take a little of that and because I've been mixing with this brush, I'm gonna roll my brush so I can get that really nice point as I pull it up. And I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna start thinking. I'm gonna work myself. I'm gonna work from left to right because I'm right-handed. So I'm gonna start with this frame. It's gonna be this kind of thicker piece of wood. It sticks out a little bit more, so there's gonna be a bit of a thick shadow line. And I can already tell my line's not straight, but it's straight enough. If we had painted this before we painted the shadow, we'd have to come back in here and redo this, which is why I waited till now. And then I'm going to I have this top piece of wood that's, the door frame. And I'm going to start with the deeper, thicker part all the way across until I get to that edge right there. And I was making that fairly thick. Now I want to make it a little bit thinner because this is where there's the two boards meet. And I kind of want to do that here as well. So kind of a thinner line. It's hard to see, but it really is. And then on this side, I'm going to do it a little bit thinner. And I'm just going to bring that down. There is our door frame. So I have the tops of the doors. I have this sort of side of the door. So I'm going to have that kind of come in. And I need to think about this. It's going to be a fairly thin line until I get to about here. And then it'll be thicker because there'll be a bit of a shadow. And then here, and it's hard for you guys to see on camera, I'm sure, because I can barely see my pencil lines. But then right here, it's going to get thinner, then it's going to get thicker. Where that board, that center board is. And then down here where this kick board is, or kick plate or whatever would be, it's going to be thinner again. Come down like so. This one, the top plate here, and this is going to be all fairly thick. This would be thin again where it meets that board. And then that come in this one. And this one would have a bit of a shadow underneath it, so I'm going to paint this line a little bit thicker because of the shadow. And then over here, again, this is going to be kind of a thinner line like that, but slightly thicker than this part. Come on down until I get to where that bottom plate is. I've now created a little bit of depth just by painting those few lines. I decided to just really simplify this upper part of the door. We're going to have a board coming down like so. And then now I need to think about this frame around this window. So and then there's going to be a bit of a shadow. So this side's going to be a bit thicker. This side's going to be a bit thicker. And then I'll just, kind of pull in these boards here. Some of these are thinner boards than others. And you can see that I'm not painting the whole line. I'm leaving some spots where I didn't paint that line. It no longer looks like just a flat blue plane. It's now starting to look more like a door, just by adding these little things. So in mine, I've got these, it's a little hard to see, but I've got a panel here, a panel here, and a panel here. And really, these are kind of indented panels, and then they're raised back out. But I'm going to simplify it a little bit for these two sides.
I have the side and upper portion of this indented panel. That's why that's why they're thicker lines on the left hand side and the top, because they're a cast shadow. And then the right hand side and the bottom will be thinner lines. And that pushes that panel in visually.
I'm going to do the same here. I've got this, and then the thicker shadow here, and a fairly thin line, and a fairly thin line. So going along, just doing the same thing here. So I've added a little bit of, indentation here. I can even add a little more detail. That's going to be a piece of wood going across. Each one of these is going to be a piece. You don't necessarily have to go in and tell that whole story, but you can do what you want. Now I'm going to have a little piece that's raised back out, and that's going to be a little carved piece that we create. So I'm going to draw it on there just so it's a little easier to see what I'm doing. So I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to do a fairly thin line on both the top and this left-hand side, because there won't be a shadow on that, and then a fairly fixed line on this because there would be shadow cast from it. So now it looks like it's raised back out. And then while that's doing its thing, I'm going to come in and kind of make up a little rosette. So I'm going to draw a little kind of circle right here.
And then I'll just kind of come in and fill in these little other portions of the rosette. Just kind of making it up as I go along.
So I've drawn on this little rosette, and now this is going to be carved out of this piece of wood. So it's going to be indented back in. So I have to start thinking about where these little indentions are going to be, where shadows are going to be. So I know that because this is partially going to be shadowed like that, I'm going to draw or paint on that little bit there. Just that little tiny bit. Here, it's going to be kind of just right there. For this one, it's going to be this whole side here. For this one, it's going to be kind of like this. And then this one's going to be kind of like that. This one will be kind of like that, maybe. This one will definitely be that shape. And then I'll just kind of give it a little bit of it. So you can see I'm just kind of making, these little indentions. And then, so this one is going to have just this bit here. And then once that dries, I'll get rid of that pencil line by erasing it. I'm going to come in and add wear and tear on this door. So I want this to look kind of beat up, give it some character. So I'm going to add a few streaks like that in there. That's not the best I've ever done. I can pull in a streak like that. I can even add a little bit of an eye. You can see I kind of have a crack with a little bit of a knot there or something. I can come in, couple of cracks there. Maybe there's a good sized crack over here. So I'm going to add some weathering to this just by adding a few little lines and things. Maybe there's a crack up there. Some down here, just where where you're getting the wear and tear on the boards. Down at the bottom, I want a pretty good dark line down here to kind of show that we're, there's dark back in under there. And I think about the direction that I'm painting these cracks has to do with the direction the grain's going to be running in a board. This board is going to have to be running this way. The grain's going to be running this way. This board, the grain's going to be running this way. So that's why I have, I've chosen the direction that these cracks and lines and whatnot are going. And really, it's just kind of playing around with it. I don't want to go too overboard with these, so I just add a few on each one. But that starts to look like an old, beat up, interesting door that has a lot of character. And it's, very lightly loaded brush. It's kind of dry, almost a dry brush technique where I'm just barely touching the paper. This is going to have some thicker, it's a thicker piece of wood, so maybe it has some thicker cracks and things. Got a nice, what looks like maybe a crack that's right there. I don't know if you can see it. I can barely see it because of the glare. I'll go back in and reload the brush. It'll just come in like so. It's just got this weird, interesting crack that happened right there. And that was just because I messed up painting that line. Yeah, just adding a little bit of that grain to this board, these boards, just makes it feel a little more wood-like. I don't want to go overboard with those, and don't want to go really light, but they're not as dark as these lines that I use to sort of divide the spaces up. So I want to kind of separate this out a little bit more. I had this kind of line that formed there, and I'm going to kind of get rid of the line, but by making this just a wee bit darker. I'm going to use some pyro orange, but you could use any regular orange, cadmium orange, whatever you're using. I'm just going to kind of come in and accentuate that, but not with a line, but actually a thick kind of shape. I'll just pull that in. And then as I get down in here, I could start dry brushing. Oh, you can't see that very well. Let's just do this. You can see I've dry brushed some of that. So it's really wet up in there. And then I just kind of came in and pulled some of that down. Just to add a little texture. And maybe add a little bit more of that color over here, but then just kind of move it around with the brush. Not worry about covering everything. But that helps flatten this out more here and helps add a bit of that makes that look vertical and this look horizontal. And I'm going to do the same here to this, I'm just going to add just a bit of this pyro orange just right here along this line. Now, right now it looks too dark, but when I come back in with a little water, we'll still see that yellow coming through, but now we've kind of made that, even though there's a pencil line there, and I could see the pencil line, you guys have probably seen the pencil line. It accentuates that without being a line, an actual line. And because it's a little crooked here, I mean, this is completely accidental, but that looks like the spot where a lot of people step, so it's worn down. So that's kind of fun. That's starting to come together. I want a little bit of a shadow from this wall on the door. I'm going to just come in with a little wash of that peacock blue green mix, and I'm going to pull that down.
And honestly, I probably should have painted this when I did that whole part of the shadow. I just forgot. So I'm going to have to kind of work to get rid of this edge that's in there. I'll have to do a little scrubbing, but I should be able to make that blend a little bit better.
Let me come in with a little bit of just royal blue. Now, it looks like I'm getting darker than this thing. What it really is doing is picking up that line that I painted there. Painting around the doorknob because it's sticking out further, so it could be in white. I know this is curved. In my head, the wall's a little off. So in my mind, maybe there's a little bit of a curve to the, a dish in the wall. I ended up making this a little too wide up here, but that's okay. Yeah, I still got that line.
So I'm just going to scrub this with a little bit more water. And then I'm going to bring in some royal blue here. And maybe a little bit of that deep violet that's a mix of quinacridone violet and royal blue. And then I'm just going to kind of straighten this edge out here, make it a little wider so it can meet up with everything. So the curve won't be quite as prevalent as it was. I'll still have that kind of dished look. Uneven adobe wall, but it won't be quite as curved.
And you can see how this shadow here that I added really helps that doorknob pop out. So that's kind of a nice thing that happens there.
So I'm just taking a little bit of indigo blue here and deepening those lines that I had to paint over and scrub just to make them pop a little bit more because they got a little bit muted when I painted that shadow over them.
So I spent a little time looking at this from a bit of a distance. And I know there's some things we need to do to kind of finish up. But one of the things that's really bugging me is this. I don't like how I did that shadow. So I'm going to come in and kind of soften this. I just don't care for how sharp that is and how far out it comes. So just a little bit of water will soften that. It needed that darker shadow, but I think I just overdid it a little. And I'm happy with that. This one, I don't mind so much because that feels like it's some other kind of thing that's casting that shadow. This was just the roundness of the pot, and I just didn't care for what I did there. So that's why I wanted to go back in and kind of soften that back. I wanted that slightly darker shadow. And then this big, huge gap here, but it's drawing too much attention. So I want to come in and do something with that. So I'm going to come in with some of that kind of green blue. Maybe I could just soften this first. I think just having a solid shadow back down there will actually work a little bit better. And this is, this is just that the way a painting will evolve as you're working on it. Sometimes you'll do something, and you'll think, well, that's not working. So you just kind of come up with a new plan. Yeah, see, I like that better. It's not perfect by any means. But I like that shape of that shadow a little bit. I was trying something and I don't feel like it worked that well. So I wanted to come in and just soften that and fill that in, make it a little bit darker than it was. It was kind of like how glaring these little bits were in the glass. That was too, it was just too much, and it was kind of pulling my eye here. And that's not where the area of interest is, which is why I need to knock this pot back. It's so bright right there in the corner that while it's doing its job of pulling your eye there, it's kind of keeping you trapped. So I want to, the first thing I'm going to do is actually do a little bit more shadow on these plants. So I'm going to come in with a little of that purple green mix that I made, and then some of that green blue mix. And I'm just going to kind of add some shadows to this spot. So I'm just going to kind of come in and add a little bit of darker stuff. Now I'm doing this while this is dry because I don't want it to run into each other. I'm just going to do a little of that. Maybe come in with this purpley color. Can't really tell on screen. Basically, I'm just kind of making some darker sections of this. So I'm breaking this light green shape up.
It's a little hard to tell here, but I'm basically switching back and forth between that green blue and the sort of dark violet made with Hooker's green as well. I'm really sorry that my hand is in the way. I wish I had the ability to turn my hand invisible just to make it a little easier for you guys to see what I'm doing.
Before this gets too dry in some spots, I want to soften that edge just a bit by adding some water. I don't want it to be super runny like it was when we were painting initially, but I do want it softer. Particularly the further we get this direction. So I have some hard edges and some soft edges in that. I know that in theory this should be darker, but I like that. I like that contrast that's going on there, so I'm not going to make that darker. I'm going to make it darker down over here. So maybe that's a little bit of light coming across, hitting that. Dark, but still some light hitting that as well. I'm going to come over here and do some shadow, more shadow on this.
So right here, I'm basically doing the same thing that I did on those other potted plants. I'm just adding darks, switching back and forth between the blue-green and the sort of violet-green. And you may be thinking, well, why are you using violet? But being a complementary color to green, that violet helps make those plants look more vibrant. So even though it's a kind of a purple, they're much more vibrant because of that. It's a little hard to tell here on this screen, but there is a difference between the two darks that I'm using. And I'm also going to soften those just like I did with the others. I put them in and then I add a little more water just to make the edges softer in areas so I have some lost and found edges.
And again, I mean, I'm not really painting leaves. I'm just kind of painting little tick marked and blobby shapes that somewhat look like plant foliage. I want to knock this back just a bit. I think I'm going to try it with a little Scarlet Lake. No, I'm going to use a little alizarin crimson. Not a lot. So it's going to be a real thin wash of alizarin crimson to kind of help knock this back. And if I get too much on there the first go, I can always add more water here. Oh, no, that's good. So you can see I just knocked that back just a bit. Still has that same kind of light.
It's just not quite as overbearingly bright.
I got a little bit too much, I think, up here. So I'm just going to take a piece of toilet paper that I kind of rolled up, kind of lift back out some of it. But that helped knock it back. I think I could probably knock this back just a skosh as well. It's so bright next to the edge of this paper. You feel like that got a little dark. So maybe if I come in here with this brush with just a wee bit of water in that rolled up piece of toilet paper, and just kind of lift that back up. Now, see, now that's too late. But I can just add a little more water to it, and it'll bleed back over. And I think that'll be fine. Let me kind of dry it.
So right now I'm just coming back in with my brush. I'm using a little bit of indigo, and I'm just sharpening these edges up a little bit so they look a little bit more like reflections of light on the glass.
I think I'm pretty happy with this.
So now we're going to do one of my favorite techniques, which is spraying a fine mist of blue around the edges. In this case, I'm using cobalt blue in a spray bottle. It's a mix of a little bit of paint inside the spray bottle with a lot of water.
So it's this guy. Now I'm going to shake it up really good before I use it. But I basically need to get all of the paint residue that was on the bottom. I need to get mixed up really good. What I am going to do is I'm going to take the top off, and I'll show you. I'm going to stick it in my water and kind of make sure that the nozzle is pretty clean. I don't want it to get clogged up. And then what I do is I'll take a few more little practice spritzes until I get blue paint coming out, which I am. And then I'm going to kind of spritz the edges of this just a little bit, not a lot. But it knocks back those edges a bit. And helps really pull you in to this right here. So you can see I added just that little bit of blue spritz, and it's mostly, it's predominantly water. It looks dark, but it's not. If I grab toilet paper here, kind of clean up my board a bit. But you can see it knocked this back a little bit. It's still bright, but not overly bright. It's not really, your eye is being pulled into this area here where I want you to be. This is just there to kind of help stop you and bring you back around. And this isn't one of my special, these bottles with the multi-size dot pattern. This is a fine mist sprayer.
And these bottles are available just about anywhere. You can get them at grocery stores, online, just about anywhere. Art supply places like Utrecht Art or Meaden Art both carry them.
Well, as Porky Pig used to say, that's all, folks. I hope you enjoyed painting along with me as much as I enjoyed creating this painting. If you made it this far and are enjoying what I'm doing, please consider subscribing to my channel and clicking that little bell to get notified of my next video. It's completely free and it really helps me out. Also, consider clicking the like button and sharing the video with anyone you think would enjoy it. Let me know if you prefer a Saturday release in the comments below, and as always, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. I'd love to hear from you. I'm new to YouTube, but I'm not new to painting, so if you have any thoughts or questions, just, give me a shout. So with that, I'll say goodbye. I'll see you in the next video, and remember, life is too short to paint on cheap paper.